Hello and welcome to Look for the Light, a podcast where we dive into the world of The Last of Us. I'm your host, Stuart Traynor, and I'm joined, as always, by someone who could almost certainly never sneak through a museum stealthily. It's Jess Sterling. Jess, how are you doing?
Just been red for Felf immediately as
Where is the lie? Where is the lie?
Both me playing the video game and me in real life. Couldn't do it. Yeah. I'm really excited to talk about this episode. It has one of the grossest moments, I would argue, of season 1. And it's just like a big episode, and I'm so excited. I mean, I'm gonna say this every single time we record. I'm really excited to talk about this episode.
Yeah, the excitement levels are certainly high. Of course, if you're new, we'd love you to subscribe. So you can follow us on all the socials at Look for the Light Pod. Filling out any kind of feedback, reviews, 5-star ratings really massively helps us out. We love to see it. We've had a fair bit of excitement since we kind of did the announcement trailer and put the word out there. A lot of kind of people messaging in saying that they're excited to kind of join us along with this, which I'm really kind of happy to see. So, of course, if you want to get in touch with us as well, you can also message us at lookforthelightpodcast@gmail.com. And maybe, just maybe, we'll start kind of getting the feedback out into the episodes as well. But we'll get to that. But, of course, if you are new, spoilers are a big concern, I imagine. So, as always, we're going to handle things carefully. We're going to focus on things episode by episode. So, for this one, we're going to be covering everything that happens in episode 2. And that's it. We're not going to spoil any future events, but for those who do want spoiler discussions, stick around towards the end, and that's where we're going to have a dedicated spoilers section. So we'll flag it for anyone that's kind of worried, that's watching along for the first time. You're in safe hands. So, with that in mind, should we jump into things, Jess?
Absolutely.
Saya telah menghabiskan waktu hidup saya untuk mempelajari hal ini. Jadi tolong dengarkan saya baik-baik. Tidak ada obat dan tidak ada vaksin.
Jadi apa yang harus kami lakukan?
Bom.
The episode opens with a flashback, which I didn't see coming out of this. Really threw me off kilter, because I was expecting it to just pick up where we left off and, just like the game does, just continue on with the story. But this flashback contextualizes things. We go back to Jakarta in Indonesia even, in 2003, just 2 days before the outbreak. And a professor of mycology is brought in for questioning to examine some evidence, and we kind of see the first real inkling of what it is that is kicking everything off. Jess, what did you think about this coming out of nowhere?
I love this. I think when they do when they make deviations from the game to build out the world, I feel like I always appreciate it, because it really sets the stakes, and it's so ominous, right? Like, this is right before the outbreak. And I think localizing it to this professor, we see her hand shaking, right, as she's like putting her teacup down. She knows more than maybe anyone else what is about to go down. And I love that, because they are changing things slightly from the game, and maybe, I don't even know that I would say changing, but like expanding on it, where the spores really are growing out and they're taking over entire locations. I appreciate that then they're taking the time to explain how that works. Obviously through multiple points on this episode, but getting a professor who's is it mycologist?
Yes.
Mycologist. An expert opinion, and how horrified she is. Immediate like fear, right? You just know, we know what's going to happen, but getting someone who says the bombs, and please let me go see my family, like, know that's bad news bears.
Yeah, because I mean, the creators of the show have said that it's always been a story about kind of love and the kind of overwhelming kind of brutality of it at times. And it's so telling that the moment, like, she swings from saying, bomb everything, but I want to go see my family. Like, this is it. This is the end. And this is certainly her last request. It's that brutality of, like, well, I've got to go see my family and I've got to be with them because this is it. And it's the first time I think we've really had a big, almost like apocalyptic level event in media where there hasn't been this kind of cheesy to camera, oh, this is it kind of moment. It's this slow dawning of just terror and horror. And then when she kind of asks if it's a human bite and do they know like who bit her kind of thing, and they don't, it's that slow realization of just, oh, this is already too, like, it's too
It's
out
too
there.
late. Yeah.
Yeah. And with the context of everything we've been through over the last few years and knowing how things can spread like wildfire unless you do get in early and act swiftly, I think had we not had that context, I think her comments of just bomb everything would have been so outrageous. But when you know the stakes of what she knows the cordyceps virus does, and knowing how behind they are in terms of information of how far out it is, I think the context makes total sense to just go
Yeah.
out there and say bomb everything, which is horrible to say.
Especially when you combine it with the flashback to the 60s that we got in episode 1, that combined with this flashback, and the fact that we later are going to see them walking through a town that has been bombed. It's
Hmm.
fascinating and heart-wrenching, and you're right, it's a quiet panic versus
Yeah.
an all-out what we see in the first episode with Joel and Ellie and Tommy, right? Like, it's a more quiet panic of one of the first people to actually realize how bad this is and what this might mean for humanity, not just
Hmm.
Indonesia, like the entire world.
Yeah.
They're really setting the stakes, and I really like what this scene does, especially because we get a closer look at how the fungus is spreading, right? We see it like reach out to her face even in a dead corpse. It's incredible, it's haunting, it's terrifying in all the ways that they're aiming for. So
Hmm.
job well done.
Yeah, I mean the terror aspect of it. Like, there's the great scene where she's kind of inspecting the body, and she kind of like delves down into the mouth with the little tweezers, and it's funny because me and my friends we rewatched Silence of the Lambs recently, and there's the same similar scene where they kind of delve into like the mouth and they pull out a little like cocoon, complete and utter shot for shot, exact same kind of
Mhm.
like scene, and I was just thinking that's got to be a good nod, and I like it because it's evoking that kind of terror. Because Silence of the Lambs changed the game when it came to horror, in the sense of like it was more thriller based, and it was very kind of like slow, uneasy terror, and mirrored it perfectly, which I really loved.
Yeah.
We then head forward to the QZ, and we open up with Ellie asleep on a kind of bed of moss, fetal position, very innocent, clutching a switchblade, I will say, which is one of the best additions that I think Bella Ramsey has brought to this, because apparently that was a suggestion of her own. It's just that I think Ellie would sleep with a knife, and it's like, absolutely she would. And of course, wakes up and sees that Joel is holding an assault rifle aimed directly at her, and Tess is looking a little concerned. Quite rightly, perhaps?
Yeah, they're still skeptical. Obviously, we're picking back up where Ellie has told them she's immune. They don't really have a big reason to believe it beyond keeping a close eye on her overnight, making sure the bite that she says is weeks old isn't getting worse, isn't spreading. And their skepticism makes sense because when she says,
There's a Firefly base camp somewhere out west. With doctors. They're working on a cure.
I've heard this before.
And whatever happened to me is
It's the key to finding the vaccine. That's what this is. We've heard this a million times. Vaccines, miracle cures. None of it works, ever.
Fuck you, man. I didn't ask for this.
You and me both. This isn't gonna end well, Tess. We need to go back.
Joel literally is saying the words at the same exact time. Like they've heard this before. They've been in this situation for 20 years. You have to imagine there was many talks of vaccines and cures happening, and especially coming from a group like the Fireflies. So fair enough for them to be skeptical. I love that Tess is the one who is ready to be hopeful first, that she is
Hmm.
the one who is ready to believe Ellie first.
Yeah.
Because I think it sets up a really interesting, knowing that we're not going to have Tess anymore by the end of the episode. It really does set up an interesting relationship between Joel and Ellie when you have Tess, who is, I don't want to say closer to Ellie, but like certainly more open to having a relationship with Ellie than Joel is in the beginning.
It makes total sense for Tess to be the one to take that kind of leap. Obviously, Joel looks to Ellie and sees trauma. I mean, it's a young girl. There's certainly maybe not the same look, but I mean the dynamic is still the same in the sense that it's a young, vulnerable girl that needs people to look after her in this brutal world. And he looks at her and sees every kind of thing that could be wrong. He sees his daughter there, and I mean, of course, there's trauma. So he, I think, instinctually goes to anger. Although it's strange that we say that, but also he is the one wanting to shoot her, which is brutal.
Yeah, I think it could be a number of things, one of which is I need to get away from this kid, and that is certainly
Hmm.
one way of doing it. But also her being connected to the Fireflies, I think, is also
Yes.
important, knowing that Tommy was a Firefly at one point, and it doesn't seem like Joel really has a great relationship with the Fireflies. So I don't know that there's any trust there for him to believe that she is the cure. She holds the cure. Um, yeah, it's so interesting. I couldn't help but focus in on how resistant Joel is to even having conversations with Ellie, opening up
Hmm.
at all to Ellie. It really is Tess who's the one being, I don't want to say maternal because that's not, but just more loving even, or
Yeah.
protective of Ellie, I would say as well.
I think it speaks to Tess being the leader in the relationship with her and Joel, is that there is this kind of, I think all leaders in some way have to be caring in like even a small way, because there's a reason why you lead, is because you want people to follow the best direction, and you do it I mean, there's an aspect of ego involved in it, but I think there is also a tiny amount of just wanting to ensure that you're taking the best path for people because you care about people that are following you on this path. And so I think that makes a lot of sense. There's some stuff with Tess's backstory that is particularly brutal. I think is probably more relevant later on, which we'll get into. But I think that will explain the whole lack of the maternal instinct being what it is, and it just being kind of like, no, I'm trying to. I mean, she even says it later on. She's like, I'm trying to keep you alive. Like it is this kind of
Mhm.
protectionism rather than anything else. But Tess has this perception, like she picks up on the small details, and she doesn't necessarily refer to them explicitly. Like it can just be a gentle glance. Like she glances down at Joel's hand and sees him kind of trembling a little bit. Obviously, from the pain of like punching a guy over and over, Joel even explains it as a hairline fracture. But I think she sees something a bit more there. That he's able to kind of explain away quite quickly and easily, but I think she sees something deeper going on there, right?
Yeah, I mean they've known each other for a long time. She's able to read Joel. She knows what he's been through. I don't think we could say that about many people in this world at this point. So, her being able to read him is fascinating, especially when we think about the fact that she's not going to be around after the end of this episode. And so
Yeah.
he's no longer going to have that support system, that rock, that kind of solid ground underneath him. Even in a world where you don't really have a home, right? We'll hear Tess say, like, that's not my home later.
Yeah.
The people around you are your home because you're not necessarily always going to be in the same location. So, yeah, I love her Again, casting couldn't be better. Anna Torv is like incredible in this role. Her ability to have a softer side, but still basically call Joel out on his shit is incredible and exactly what we needed for the role of Tess.
Yeah. It's always good for Joel to have people push against the hard exterior, whether it be kind of from a kind of just a loving kind of sense from Tess, or whether it just be from Ellie just pushing his buttons. Like when she pretends to be infected
I love
and
it.
Tess shuts it down immediately. It's like, don't. But because I think she's almost like, don't do it because it's a bad joke. Comes with a lot of inherited trauma. I mean, they've had to deal with this for 20 years. There's a lot of stuff that we've not seen on screen that they have been through related to this stuff. But equally, I think again, it's probably because this guy is going to shoot you if you continue stuff like that. Like, cut it out, kid.
Yeah. I just love it though. I
Hmm.
love that we get to see in this episode, and we'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to some of the other locations. Getting to see Ellie do kid things is just
Yes.
so wonderful. And because the world sucks so much, and because everything is so serious and life or death, the fact that she's bringing some levity to it, even though let's not pretend that Ellie hasn't had an extremely difficult upbringing, right?
Oh yeah.
She's also experienced, encounters with the infected. So it's not like she hasn't been there, but she's a kid. So she still has a little bit of that innocence, that wide-eyed innocence at seeing a like let's face it, she's never been out of the QZ. She's never
Hmm.
seen anything that she's getting to see right now.
Yeah. And this world is normal for her. So why wouldn't she joke about it? Why? Like, yeah, it's brutal, but like our world is brutal. We make jokes about the brutality of our world at times because it's what you have to do to get through it. And for her, this isn't exceptional. This isn't a well, there was a wonderful world that has gone to this. This is the default for Ellie. And so of course it's second nature to make jokes about it. I love the fact that it does make Bella Ramsey seem a lot younger than they are,
Yeah.
which is again, I think it's just a testament to the acting on screen of just how seamless it is. It doesn't feel put on either. Like it seems like they've almost caught and just said, Bella, go with it, you do you kind of thing. And they've just
Yeah.
caught them just ad-libbing and being a bit of a doofus, which I think was brilliant.
Yeah, it's a combination of obviously Bella Ramsey looks quite young anyway, but
Mhm.
coupled with the snark of a teenager, any typical teenager, right? Like, "Oh, can I have a gun? No. I'll just throw a sandwich at it, I guess then." Like,
Yeah.
very snarky. Also, just there are certain things that when a kid sees them for the first time, it not even just might spark joy, but like curiosity, right? Intrigue. Oh my gosh, I've read books about this. All of it is exciting and new to Ellie in a way that it would be for a kid in your everyday average world that isn't full of infected, right? Like bringing a kid somewhere for the first time, you're going to get to see it through their eyes in a way that we're getting to do with Ellie, and makes her seem a lot younger. Also helpful that she's like again sleeping in the fetal position as a very literally the fetal position.
Yeah.
It makes her look quite young. So I do love it.
Yeah. And we get a lot of this as they're kind of traveling through Boston because we see the kind of the fallen buildings, the kind of the beauty of it, weirdly. There's so much destruction on display, but you've got like these kind of overgrown, mossy, ivy kind of ridden exteriors, accompanied by destruction. You've got literal craters in the earth from the bombings. And Ellie even refers to them as like it's like the moon.
It's like a fucked up moon. Is this where they bombed?
Yeah. They hit most of the big cities like this. They had to slow the spread somehow. It worked here, but it didn't in most places.
Like there's this childlike fascination with the world because I mean she's not been outside the walls of the QZ, and this is the reality of the world that she hasn't seen. Like she's not seen proper greenery. I can't imagine within the walls of the
No.
QZ, right? And
I
so to
can't
come
imagine.
out here
I
and see it,
mean,
it's like quite stark a contrast.
I'm trying to think of what the tallest building she's probably even seen is, right? Like
True,
she's
yeah.
looking at skyscrapers that have fallen over, are literally like Leaning Tower of Pisa style. It's incredible. This is so beautiful in a twisted, messed up way. It is like absolutely gorgeous. And the amount of times that I watch the show, I'm still amazed every single time at not just the fact that they were able to recreate this video game in such a seamless way. Everything looks so real and just like unimaginable devastation, while also just this morbid curiosity of what it must be like to just walk along the highway where there's like dozens of cars just abandoned in the street. It's eerie and creepy and fascinating, and they do such a great job at immediately putting you in this world of what, making you question what would happen if the world
Yeah.
just kind of ended overnight.
Yeah. One of the great things about the games is the amount of environmental storytelling that there is. A lot of it's done through little notes and kind of
Right.
trinkets that you pick up, of course. But then there's other aspects of just looking at a scene, how it's displayed, and just seeing the story as it would have played out previously. Like when you see those abandoned cars on the kind of overpass that they're kind of walking along, you people don't just leave their cars on overpasses. They fled from them. So you can imagine this horde of infected running towards them and just this chaos unfolding. And you can see the scene almost like kind of in your mind, really. And they don't have to talk about it. They don't have to do it. All they have to do is have the cars there. And I think that says so much about the attention to detail. I love the fact that you mentioned like the Leaning Tower of Pisa building, because in the game, of course, you kind of go through the hotel that's all wonky. Oh, it's so jarring to play through that. Every time I kind of get a bit giddy because I'm like, oh, it's coming up. This is really cool. But also, there's dread because I know what I've got to go through.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
and
don't want to
it's
do that again.
I love the okay, we got it. We either go the way we die or the long way. And it's like, okay, well, let's go the long way. But unfortunately, the long way is now blocked because
Yes.
and again, I love that we get this explanation from Tess that last time we were here, it didn't look like this. Slowly but surely, the infected are taking over the city. And again, perfect exposition of how the cordyceps work and how
Mhm.
they're this network that can communicate with one another over vast distances. It is I remember watching this episode for the first time and being horrified. This is so much scarier than anything that's in the game. In the game, it's very much airborne illness, right? Spit,
Mhm.
air. That's what it is. The idea that you could step on a mushroom and miles away, a horde of infected will come for you
Yeah.
is terrible. I mean, obviously, we see it later in this episode, but I love the explanation. And I love that we hear from Tess that we were here not long ago and it was not like this. So it's only gotten worse and it's only going to
Yeah.
get worse.
This is there's a fantastic documentary all about mushrooms that's on Netflix. Delves into the kind of psychedelics of it all and stuff, but
Mhm.
mycelium networks are staggering. I think I could be wrong in misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure I'm confident with it. But there is like an assessment of the largest organic creature that there is. And obviously, blue whale, massive, and all sorts of
Right.
big trees and things like that. But mycelium is the biggest thing because it's all interconnected. It's all underground. You don't see it. And it goes on for miles and miles. And of course, there is this kind of like information relay. It's, I mean, it's like the internet in that it just keeps growing and it keeps getting more
Mhm.
and more deadly. Like, it's so horror coded as well because you don't even know that you've tripped off something. Like, it could be just a little tendril that just grows out of the ground, and then all of a sudden, a horde is heading your way because they know you're there. I like the practicalities of some things around it, though, as well, like Joel checking whether or not they're kind of dried out, whether they're alive and things, which is really good. I think that really grounds him in being kind of adapted to this environment and kind of has built up some sort of, I guess, defense mechanisms against it of like being able to identify this, which explains why he's a good smuggler. Because if they were just walking in there and like just stepping on anything willy nilly, that'd been awful.
Right. It's incredible. We get so they can't go through the state house as a result of
Hmm.
this blockage. So they're gonna have to go through the museum, which is where Joel is kind of checking out the spores, and it looks like the front of the building is just taken over with spores. They're like, we have to get all the way up to the roof because that's where we're going to be crossing over. And anyone who's played the game just knows this isn't going to go well.
Yeah.
Um, and I was a little astonished on my rewatch that it's we have Ellie asking earlier about kind of the myth surrounding the infected, right? Is it
Hmm.
true that there are infecteds that will throw spores at you, right? Bloaters, as they're known in the game. Is it true that there are ones that have like sonar, like bats? It's interesting that Joel and Tess don't take that opportunity to explain to Ellie a little bit more about the infected, knowing
Hmm.
that there's a real chance they'll encounter some, especially when we all know clickers rely on sound. So
Yeah.
being quiet is of the utmost importance. And I wonder, Stuart, I'm not sure your opinion on this or if it's ever really been discussed, but I wonder if it's to preserve her innocence in a way or just not scare her. I don't know.
That's always been my thing. In that there is this kind of always like level of like, hey, here's what the kids should know, here's what the adults know. And I certainly do think it is a little bit from preserving her innocence a bit. I think it's also from the sense of not wanting to panic her just in case. And also maybe a bit of manifestation of just, well, if we don't talk about it, maybe it won't appear. Maybe we could
Yeah.
get lucky like that. Who knows? Um, Maybe a misstep in not fully briefing Ellie on what a click is, but like, how brief can you be other than just shut the f up? Because
Yeah.
there's not much you can do except just try not to trigger it and get the hell out of there, right?
That is the move, which is exactly what ends up happening when they enter the museum and they
Hmm.
see a man who looks freshly killed. They know they're going into something.
I don't hear it.
Who would you hear?
Who would you hear? Are you saying an attempted did that? Because I've been attacked by one and it wasn't like that.
Okay, from this point forward, we are silent. Not quiet. Silent.
Whoa.
No questions. Let's do it.
I love the tension of them walking up the stairs trying to avoid the mycelial
Hmm.
threads all over.
Yeah.
You see this like husk of a human kind of like at one with the stairs at this point.
Oh
It's
yeah.
so tense, especially because Ellie is a curious character. She is, and understandably so. She hasn't
Yeah.
left the QZ. She hasn't experienced. She's experienced a lot, but not outside of the QZ. So she has questions, but this is not the time for answering the questions. This is the time to shut up and watch your back and stay behind us. Right? You still don't get a gun, but stay behind us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What's your
it's
thoughts
really
on the
tense.
whole gun situation? Of course, I think it comes from, I think Joel not necessarily trusting the whole infection thing yet still. So there is a whole risk of obviously giving a potentially infected a gun while they've maybe, because I mean, it shows in kind of twitching for a lot of people. So maybe like a twitchy finger on a trigger is probably a bad idea. But I mean, that aside, do you think it's again a protectionism thing of like not wanting to give Ellie a gun and ruin her childlike innocence, or is it just a practicality thing?
I think it could be a combination of she's a kid. Does she even know how to shoot? I think like the
Hmm.
danger of is it more likely that she will hurt one of us versus a clicker? What if I get into a fight with an infected and she thinks she's being brave, attempts to shoot it
Mhm.
and shoots me? I think that's a real danger, not knowing her any sort of like, what is her background with guns? Has she ever even used a gun? I think there's an inherent danger there. And I also think it's preserving her innocence, wanting to keep her alive. And they think, well, we're better with guns than she is. We should be the ones who hold them. Obviously, like, I think it's you need to teach a kid how to shoot a gun if you're going to give them a gun. I don't
Mhm.
think you're going to want to be doing that in the heart of Boston City where you know there's tons of infected. Loud guns going off, probably not an ideal place to teach a kid how to shoot a gun if that's the
Yeah.
move. So,
It's a
yeah.
consideration that's often not afforded to like media, considering whether or not someone is, you know, good at shooting before giving someone a gun. Apparently, if you hand a gun to someone in most media, they're automatically just the best
Yeah.
shooters in the world. Headshots galore, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. But there's that top-down shot of they going up the stairs. So good. But again, the practicalities of Joel keeping some of the quiet things under wraps, like the whole pulling the kind of empty bullets out into his pocket quietly, delicately. And there's a great supercut as well. I'm gonna like jumping all over the place here, but mind is everywhere. But then there's a great TikTok cut of um, them doing stupid stuff in this episode, or at least Ellie doing stupid stuff, and it's all set to the kind of Wii music of everything,
Mhm.
like the do 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 do, and it's when Ellie steps on the dried out kind of tendril,
Mhm.
and then just that oh shit face. It's the funniest thing ever. If anyone can find it, go look it up. But it's kind of just I love the whole way in which they approach this of just this delicate, quiet, like kind of steps. They really take it seriously. And all it does is build up the ferocity of the clickers. That looks stunning. This was,
It's so
I think,
good.
my biggest concern going into it. It's just how they would do the clickers. And they look so good, right?
They look like the video game, but elevated times 10 because it is an older video game at this point, effects have come a long way and they're
Hmm.
made with prosthetics. They took a lot of time to get them right. And that
Yeah.
is what's important, especially in something where this is the danger. Yes, people are the danger, right? But this is in your face, screaming at you, making creepy noises. They have to feel real. And the prosthetics are so good and horrifying and just like I don't want to say beautiful because it sounds weird, but they are beautiful. It's
They
like
are, yeah.
take a mushroom and put it on someone's head in a really cool way. That sounds stupid, but it looks so good that it immediately sets the tone of exactly what they were going for in the museum, which is the danger has been ratcheted up to 20,
Hmm.
especially Stuart coming on the heels of the conversation Tess has with Ellie, where she says, yes, you are immune, but you're not immune from being ripped apart. Like, you could
Yes.
still die just because you somehow aren't turning into an infected from a bite. They could still kill you. So the danger is very real.
Yeah, and it removes this whole thing of plot armor. The moment you find out about Ellie's immunity, I think there's this concern that, oh, okay, well, of course she's got to get to the end because she's immune. Like, what danger is there? And when Tess reaffirms, no, you can literally get torn apart by these things. Like, if you're, it's a strange thing to say. If you're lucky, maybe you won't get torn apart. Maybe you'll turn infected, but it's kind of like there are so many options to this. There's a lot of complexity in this world,
Mhm.
and yeah, to add in the okay, we'll take away that risk, but you've still got umpteen other risks. It makes the stakes still feel real, which is fantastic. There's some certain points I love about this whole choice of going through the museum as well. There's this whole kind of theme of the cordyceps virus just not giving a shit about history and not giving a thing for reverence of what's come before and just dominating and taking over, which I think is a great theme as well. And I love also the fact that everyone gets lost. Like, best thing to do in a museum is to split up and just go explore it on your own and kind of absorb it all. And of course, everyone splits up in the museum, and it heightens the fear up massively because everyone is just fighting for themselves alone in this. And you get all these kind of moments of people winding through from different directions, coming back into like kind of rooms and scenes with each other. And it's a great way of explaining a certain situation that comes up with Tess a little bit later, which is maybe not the best thing.
Yeah,
Oh,
especially because Ellie gets bit again, and her reaction is so funny
yeah.
because she's just like, "Ugh, again? Like, God, what an inconvenience for me."
Yeah.
Versus like certain death if anybody else got bit. I think it's really funny, and we get, like, the fear. You could see a little bit of fear in Joel's eyes of, like, maybe the first one didn't take.
Mhm.
Maybe all it takes
Exactly.
is this other one. We
Yep.
don't know. He's saying this to Tess, who doesn't reveal it until later, but has been bitten, and she is
Mhm.
aware of that in this moment, and rewatching the episode, knowing that Tess knows in that moment she is going to die soon, I think it's brilliantly acted. She's so short, she's so frustrated because she knows Joel is going to be the one to have to continue this journey without her. So she's going
Mhm.
to need to convince him in a very short amount of time that he needs to pursue this journey, that he needs to keep Ellie safe because she can no longer be the one pushing and pushing and pushing. She won't be around to do that.
Yeah. There's also the whole you're imagining the what ifs and you're imagining the worst what if. While she's bitten, she doesn't want to imagine the worst what if. She wants to imagine the most hopeful. What if she's unaffected by this bite? What if I'm now unaffected by this bite just by being in proximity to her, maybe? Or what if it's just a
Mhm.
luck thing? Maybe the virus is wearing off slowly, and maybe we're the lucky two that can get away with this. She doesn't want to hear right now that this kid is going to probably turn again and we need to like get ahead of it because she's deep down hoping that she's going to get through it. But I love the fact that she does become quite short in conversation. She's very mission focused. She's like, no, we need to press ahead. We need to get there because
Mhm.
time is running out for them.
Yeah. And this
Gosh.
the small beat of Joel being like, "Listen, I know it's scary to walk across a plank between buildings." And she's like, "This is wood. I'm not afraid of wood. I'm afraid of what we just left." Like it sets the stakes where listen, people are really scared of heights. Like that is
Mhm.
probably number one fear for most of humanity is heights. So fair enough. And I'm not going to want to walk across some rickety piece of wood strung between two buildings. No, thank you. But Ellie, like compared to what she just went through, this is nothing. And I love that she's just like, just walks right across it, no problem.
Yeah, heights can be a real problem for some people. Let's just bear that in mind. But less said on that. I love the thing that beforehand as well. It's like it gives them a moment when she does walk over the kind of wood and gets away. It gives Joel and Tess just a quiet moment to kind of recoup. I do kind of love these moments of Ellie kind of just pressing on and having the energy of a child, and Joel and Tess almost playing catch up a little bit. It's seen earlier when Tess is like, "You try walking up 10 flights of stairs with our fucking knees." It's just so real. But
Yeah.
then also, it's a great moment of like Joel taping up Tess's ankle with electrical tape and just that kind of caring moment between the two of them. And I think ordinarily Tess would be very appreciative of it, but in the moment she's just like, "Come, let's kind of get it going. Stop being so negative, Joel," and
Hmm.
is pushing ahead. Joel then obviously gets to have that chat with Ellie as he goes over the plank and they admire the view. Something I think to kind of just log down in for later in the season of just them two looking out over a vista. But we also, I guess, like get the like conversation of just Ellie appreciating the world and just saying you can't deny that view. And then Joel just that little glance to the watch, which is brutal because it's the first inkling, the first teeny tiny inkling that maybe he's growing to have a bit of affection. And I think, I know this is my read on it, that he looks at the watch and kind of feels a pang of guilt, maybe, I thought, because it was kind of like, I shouldn't appreciate her company because I don't have Sarah. Did you
Hmm.
think that was the same, or am I reading something?
I could see it. I think it could be a mixture of emotions. Often one time we don't usually just feel one emotion at a time. And so
Hmm.
I could see it being guilt that he is enjoying Ellie's company to a certain degree. There's a moment in the when they walk through the hotel when we learn she can't swim and he just hops off the bottom step.
Yeah.
And she's going to the counter and just oh yes, please, one room. Like she's playing fun. There can't be a ton of times where Joel has come across a kid just being a kid at this
Mhm.
point in this world. And I do think those moments kind of add up and bring him back because most people, they're very jaded and skeptical in this world now, and them looking out at a destroyed city that they probably remember what it looked like before all of this. They're not going to say, wow, look at that view. That's nice. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, our world is destroyed. And I think
Mhm.
being with someone like Ellie, who is a curious kid at the end of the day, of course, is going to bring him back to what it was like raising Sarah. So
Yeah.
I do think it's both. I think he can appreciate her curiosity and her kind of inexperience with the world while also feeling extremely guilty that he's getting this time with her and not with Sarah.
Yeah. It's it's quite wild to jump from when they're admiring the beauty of the world and they get to the state house and we're reminded of the harsh reality of it as they get there, find that the truck is well, it's been a bit of a problem. Everyone's dead by the looks of it. There's no supplies there. No one's around, but there is a trail of blood that leads inside, and that's not ordinarily a good sign. Kind of bad.
No, no, and Tess's panic, I think, sends the viewers into a little bit of a panic as well. She
Mhm.
assumed they would get to the state house, pass Ellie on, and then she could have a sigh of relief and die, knowing that she played her part in getting Ellie where she needed to go.
Yes.
Arriving at the state house and not having things go as planned, I think sends Tess for a tailspin. And we see her panicking and no, Joel, you're wrong. Like looking through everything. There must be a map. There must be something. She knows time's running out.
One of them got bit. The healthy ones fought the sick ones. Everyone lost. Tess, what are you doing?
Where did Marlene say that she was taking you? Ellie.
I don't know, just west.
Just west. Fuck. Okay, well, I mean, one of them's got to have a map on them, right? Joel, can you help me?
No. Tess, it's over. We are going home.
This is not my fucking home!
And it's so brutal. It's so brutal, especially when we hear from Joel that it was as simple as one person got infected. The people who weren't infected tried to fight and they didn't win. And
Yeah.
that's it. All it takes is one. And so it's really tragic to they just fought so hard to get here with the hopes of getting a battery, getting to Tommy, all of these things, and all for nothing at this point.
Yeah. It's so rough to know that all it took was one small slip up by one person in the group and everything falls apart. Um Suffice to say history repeats itself because the same happens with us. Tess obviously reveals that she is infected and it looks particularly rough already. And immediately they know that it's not going to be hopeful for Tess. But also it means and doubles down on that Ellie is actually immune. This was a great, I think, use of it in the show over the game because obviously in the game we have the confirmation of Ellie's immunity through the spores, but we don't get that in this. We have to have some sort of additional confirmation because otherwise there would be this lingering question of just well, what if it was just that one bite? What if it was just kind of luck, maybe? And so every time in the game you go through the spores and Ellie is there without a mask and is able to survive it, we have that confirmation. And so in the show, in having the second bite, it reaffirms it. And it's a great way of like Tess being able to draw a comparison and say, no, this is real Joel. And to properly drill it into him that there is hope in this world that can be like grasped onto. It's just such a shame that she has to fight so hard for him to get that through. And of course, I think it was brutal as well that Ellie is the one to realize with Tess what is going on.
Yeah, she says, "Oh no," before Joel realizes what's going on, and I think part of that is like a mental block of like this can't happen to Tess because we've survived this long together. We really get I think we come to understand their relationship even better when we see Pedro Pascal's reaction, his face when she's saying all of this and knowing this is the end. Just like everyone else before her that Joel has cared about, soon she will be gone, but she will make a sacrifice for them to be able to escape because one of the infected comes back alive. Joel shoots it, but all we see is these tiny tendrils crawling up on the guy's finger. And a mile away, all of those infected and clickers that we saw earlier awaken, and they have minutes, maybe, before these clickers will, or excuse me, infected will arrive and tear them all to pieces. And
Yeah.
obviously this is different from the video game where in this moment in the video game you fight Fedra, not
Mhm.
infected. I like the decision to have it be infected rather than Fedra, mostly because it's that world building aspect of really showing exactly how the communication network of the mycelial threads works
Yeah.
and showing how dangerous it is. Um and it's just like it's so brutal watching Joel have the realization of Tess is right. I have to continue on with Ellie. It's what she wants. And
Mhm.
Ellie so resistant to leaving Tess behind. She's
Yes.
screaming as Joel is carrying her out of the building.
Yeah, there's a real departure, and it's as faithful as this show is to the video games. I like these kind of small departures in certain scenes on certain kind of ways in which they approach it. The way in which Ellie fights more in the show is a fantastic choice because it really shows that immediately there's a bond between Ellie and Tess, which I think is going to play into a few things that come up, which is going to be great. But also, it just shows that she is willing to speak truth when she doesn't agree with something, and she's willing to stand up for herself, and she's loyal, which is a great kind of quality to Ellie, is that she is incredibly loyal when she does have a bond with someone. And so to show that in the way in which she fights against Joel, who literally drags her away, is
Mm.
fantastic. I think the choice to, like as you said, of having the horde of infected over Fedra is so good because it also underpins how quick they do move. Like this isn't a slow, because you think of mycelium and fungus growth as being quite a slow process, and just the way in which it kind of under the fingernail as well. It's gruesome. It grows under there, and that is a slow process. But the moment they're active and awake, they're booking it. They're running towards that state
Yeah.
house, which is kind of just totally scary. But I think my biggest like thing that I liked about the departure is the way in which Tess kind of appeals to Joel, because it's two very different dynamics between the video game and the show. In the video game, there's almost like a pleading of and weighing it on the relationship side of things. Annie Wershing, the voice actress for Tess, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, does a great performance where the hands are raised, just like I'm kind of doing now in the video, and it's like there's something like you have to admit that there's something here. There's enough of something here to do this for me.
There's enough here that you have to feel some sort of obligation to me, so you get her to Tommy's. They're here.
Damn it.
I can buy you some time, but you have to run.
You want us to just leave you here?
Yes.
There is no way that...
I will not turn into one of those things. Come on. Make this easy for me.
And she puts so much weight in obligation and appealing to that aspect of Joel of like, you do this not for the hope of what there is and for everything that's coming. Do this for me. And whereas Anna Torv's Tess certainly labors that, but also there's this just glimmer of hope of what it could be, of correcting everything, And that final line of just save who you can save. Oh, chef's kiss. Just
Yeah.
such a good touch.
The what if of it all. What if she is the cure? And
Mhm.
you know that you are the person to keep her safe. You've kept me safe, right? You kept Tommy safe, and we kept each other safe. And on top of all of that, that if she is the cure, like we think she is, then you can't trust her in anyone else's hands but yours.
Mhm.
And even if she isn't the cure, that doesn't the Fireflies still think she is, and that means
Yeah.
that bringing her to them will get you what you need, which is a battery to go see Tommy, to go find Tommy. So it's yeah, I love the way, because there is a little bit of a distinction between the way Anna Torv plays Tess and how Tess is in the video game.
Mhm.
I like to look at it as like again, when we're looking at adaptations, I feel like it's expanding and providing depth to the character of Tess rather than taking anything away from the video
Yes.
game. It's like expanding on it. And I love the sacrifice. I love that we get these final moments with Tess, where we get to see, again, going back to that in episode 1, the 1960s kind of discussion of these mycelial threads will use you like a puppet. You will
Mhm.
be a puppet to them. And getting to see that take over in Tess, like this is the way I read it. And I don't know if I don't know that I've had this discussion before, or at least like if I've read it in this way where Tess she's knocked over all the what is it, gas or whatever it is, the flammable liquid, and she's has all the very haphazardly knocks over a big thing of grenades, which feels very dangerous when Joel and Ellie are still in the building, but whatever. Pins won't fly out of those. She's trying to light her Zippo lighter, right? She's just trying and trying and trying, and she can't get it. And then the infected are coming into the building, stomping through the liquid, and we see her lock eyes with another infected. And it's almost like suddenly she does not have control of her own body. And
Mhm.
it could be read as fear, which certainly is like fair enough. The way I view it is that she is slowly losing control of her own body.
Yeah.
And the only thing she has control over is like the thumb, right? She's flicking
Yes.
the switch, and she's panicking because when that thing comes close to her and we get that nasty kiss, the
Mhm.
nasty thready kiss, you see the fear in Tess's eyes. And it's so brilliant because it is a way to show exactly what this infection will do to you as a person. You don't have and in today's world, not having control over your own body is so horrifying, and to see it displayed on television, it's beautiful and perfect and terrifying. And I love that they chose to do it this way, as much as I absolutely can't stand the kiss.
Yeah, I'm always conflicted when it comes to the kiss because I've heard what the showmakers have kind of said on it, and they wanted everyone to feel exactly what you have said. Is that it's a sense of violation. It's a sense of you being unable to really kind of control, and it is just a kind of a horrible thing to happen, and you're completely powerless against it, and you're meant to feel that uneasiness and you're meant to feel that horror. I I kind of also see an aspect of what has been discussed around the whole thing of that it is nature in a way, in that like very much in the kind of nature documentaries out in the well, procreation isn't necessarily beautiful. Like it can be horrible, it can be violating at times. And this is a natural event. And so I see that kind of argument of like I see what they were going for. Did it necessarily have to be a kiss? Because obviously that's very kind of, I mean, to us as people who live in our society and kind of know the social etiquette around what kissing is and what it involves, it is all the more brutal. And I don't necessarily know if it's something that I wanted to see. But then I guess it's not something you're meant to feel comfortable with. So I guess they achieved what they were going for. Is it something that I would do if I were in their shoes? Possibly not. But that's just not, I think, a difference in artistic style. and I can see why they did what they did. I just wouldn't necessarily make that choice myself. But to have what I did like is that sense of Tess losing control of her own body, but still having the hope or at least the perseverance to have that thumb just keep going, keep hopefully trying, and to do it. And to blow that sucker up, because whoa, that's a big explosion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not supposed to be comfortable, and I can appreciate that about it, that it makes me extremely uncomfortable to watch because this isn't comfortable and it isn't pretty and it isn't
Mm,
great. Like it happens. This is the world that they're living in. Um yeah, and I think we can, not that we see it coming, but it does tie back into that very first scene in Jakarta, right? Like it does track with what we saw in that scene and what we
mhm.
saw in the premiere with the lady next door. The old lady just doing a little mantrasins and the nasty little tendrils coming out her mouth. It's disgusting. This is how it spreads. So it's, it takes control over your body and it's not pretty. Yeah, it's a great scene. It's a horrifying scene. I
Mhm.
remember watching this one for the first time and being like, "That didn't happen in the video game. That didn't happen. What are we doing?" Ugh, just like horrified. It was so bad. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it really is. And then the big explosion happens. Joel and Ellie get the heck out of there, and we're left with the pair of them kind of looking at each other, and I think both bearing this real disdain for each other in the moment, because obviously Joel is looking to this like kid and blaming her for everything because they wouldn't be on this endeavor if it were for her.
Mm,
And I think she also feels the same because he abandoned Tess in that moment. And I know that it doesn't make sense because they had to abandon Tess, but I don't think that that betrays Ellie's emotions in that moment. Is that she can be logically wrong, but still be logically angry.
yeah,
And the two of them are probably in, I would say, the worst they're going to be for a while. Just, yeah, this is
yeah.
a brutal moment to start off with just the two of them.
Knowing that everyone in Ellie's family is gone. Everyone has
Hmm.
either left or been killed or isn't around. And Tess, probably someone that she at least felt somewhat of a connection with, certainly over Joel at this point, that now Tess is not only gone, but that Ellie feels like they abandoned her in like a time that she needed other people, despite the fact that it was Tess who said, "You should go, leave me, I'll buy you some time." Again, like you said, it's not logic and it emotions rarely are. Of course, she's going to feel a sort of way about how Joel carried all of this out. Uh, Through 2 episodes, we've only seen Joel act one way in front of Ellie, and that is very hardened to the world around him and like task oriented. We have to get you here. I'm not here to tell you my life story. Like,
Hmm.
oftentimes she asks him questions and he just says, "Pass. We're not talking
Yeah.
about that." He's not willing to open up to her. And I think Tess was a little more open to Ellie and asked her questions. "Oh, is there someone going to come looking for you? What about parents? What about a boyfriend?" Joel isn't the one asking those questions. Of course,
Hmm.
Ellie is going to feel a connection with Tess over Joel at this point. And of course, she's going to blame him. He's the only other one there. Oftentimes, that's what happens. You have no one else to blame besides the person you're next to. And they're the one who are going to bear the brunt of that. So it's understandable, especially knowing she's a kid, especially knowing this is a very fraught situation. So, oh, it's such a tough ending, but
Yeah.
yeah, it had to happen.
So that's the events of the episode. As an episode in itself, then, I guess, what did you think of this? I thought this was a particularly good episode. I thought it was a necessary episode, obviously, because you have to get into, I guess, the stride of the show and the establishing kind of, well, what is, because we've had the setup, we've had the flashbacks before, and I think opening with the flashback to Jakarta made sense to kind of give you the context around the infection and to explain more of what the cordyceps itself is, and things. But I also appreciated this episode for being what it was in terms of like establishing what is to come in terms of the journey aspect and kind of what the involvement is now that they're out of the QZ. So what did you think about the episode as a whole then yourself, Jess? Good,
It
bad?
almost feels like, yeah, it almost feels like we're on a mini arc. Like knowing that episode 1 originally was supposed to be 2 episodes, right?
Mhm.
I feel like you can kind of count this as like episode 3 in a way, and we're completing a specific arc where we have introduced the world and why the world is the way it is. We've built out like exactly what happened. We've built out how the cordyceps travel and how they infect people, and we've set the stakes of people can die on the show. People can die in this story. It will happen. And also, I think it shows us the motivation. It shows us why Joel is going to continue on this journey with Ellie, and it is because of Tess. Because
Mhm.
of her plea to him, because of the hope that she had that Ellie is the cure. So I like it. It really feels like a second setup episode, and I don't say that in a negative way because it's setting up the world, but also the emotions and kind of the connections, right? The relationship between Joel and
Yeah.
Ellie. All of that stuff feels like it was established in this episode that also showed us clickers and the world. Like there was a lot that they got done in this hour of TV. It's honestly pretty astonishing how much they were able to pack in. Like no time was wasted. Not a single second
No.
was wasted in this episode.
And I don't feel it was rushed either. Like I feel like it goes at a decent pace. I mean, the whole scene in the museum could have been really kind of like expedited. They could have not had as much of the kind of slow, tense walking, but it wouldn't have hit as good. They do
Mhm.
take their time to like fully breathe. I completely agree with you in terms of like the setup of everything and the establishment of the relationships. I also like tying them to the themes that they're establishing of like there is hope available, there's also brutality. It is they do such a good job with this. And I, for one, when I was watching this, was so joyous because it felt as if like because you can get lucky with season premieres. You can really kind of because you have the hype of everything. We also have the establishment of an iconic game opener that is hard to really do wrong if you stick to what is there. Because I mean, they could have done the game opening shot for shot, and I would have been so bought in because it was already brilliant. But to have the second or what would perhaps the third episode here stick the landing almost, and I say it's stupid to say that because it's not landed yet. We're only in the second episode, but it's just it sets up that okay, we can expect this quality throughout. It raises the bar, and I think, I mean, we're podcasting about this. I don't think it's any secret that we are fans. So I think the bar was certainly kind of met, but they raised the bar, and I don't think they necessarily needed to because it was already pretty fucking high. So for me, I was overwhelmed with joy when that happened.
Yeah. They really do a great job. It feels like I mean, we're going to talk a lot about this. We already have talked a lot about this. Adaptations can be very tricky, especially if you're deviating from the source material. And
Hmm.
every change they make feels so thoughtful and well thought out and purposeful. So those are the things that I think a lot of fans of the original video game were scared of is what changes are they going to make to this beloved source material? And through 2 episodes, I think we can see any changes they've made feel there's a reason behind them. And
Yeah.
it's to better kind of situate us in the world that we're in and to explain a little bit more, especially because, Stuart, you have to imagine, while we have played the video game and many, many people who are watching it have, so some viewers they're trying to pull in who've never played the video game in their life. So
Hmm.
they have to do a fair bit of explaining to get those viewers on board as well.
Yeah. You've got to explain what a clicker is without
Mhm.
just throwing a ton of clickers at them. Because to get the context of what a clicker is and to understand what it's doing in that moment is essential for a viewer.
Mhm.
So imagine if they just turned up and everyone's like, "What on earth? Why are they barking? Like, what the heck is going on?" No, to have the detail layering, it was perfect. Really solid episode. So, for those of you who are spoiler averse, now is the time to head off. It's been wonderful having you. Of course, if you're new here, please do subscribe. It really does help us out. Find us on all the socials at Look for the Light Pod. Email in any feedback, any theories you might have. If you are a first-time watcher, that'd be fantastic. You can always email us at lookforthelightpodcast@gmail.com, and we look forward to them. But for those of you who want to dive into the spoilers with us for both the rest of the season and the games, well, this is for you. Let's talk spoilers.
Oh, the minute that Ellie mentions a bloater, we all died.
Yeah.
We all died. We're like, yeah, that's true. That's a thing, Ellie.
They chuck them and they're the worst.
The worst. You need the fire. What is it? The fire gun? What is it called? I never remember.
The
Blowtorch?
flamethrower?
Flamethrower. Need
Yeah.
a flamethrower to kill a bloater. Just a little friendly tip from me to you,
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get that early game when you're going through the school, but
No.
here's hoping.
In that case, run and shoot,
Yeah.
run and shoot, run and shoot is the name of the game.
Yeah, hope and pray. Endure and survive.
Endure and survive, exactly. Oh yeah, I do love
Ah.
her asking about bloaters, and they're kind of just like quiet. It's like, yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, I am so excited for the bloater that does turn up is pretty brutal. We don't have to wait that long. I think it's like 2 episodes. I think it's in the second of the Henry and Sam arc that we've
It
got
is,
coming out.
yes. Yep.
So yeah, we don't have long to wait for that. I am particularly excited for some of the stuff that we get in part 2. That's going to be incredible with the new season coming up. Speaking of the new season coming up, something I wanted to get into that is particularly kind of poignant for this episode is some photos of Ellie have been kind of leaked, I guess, from like kind of production shots and things like that. And it shows that Ellie's hair, of all things to fixate on, Ellie's hair has that kind of like pony tail, but not like the full ponytail. And it's exactly as Tess's hair in the TV show. Not
Oh my gosh.
yeah. And this is a thing because it's been talked about in the games for quite some time because obviously in part 2 she sports a very similar hairstyle to Tess in the game, except obviously Tess in the game has the like the bandana that she kind of wears as like almost like a headband. And so people are saying, it's a lot to fixate on. It's just a hairstyle. It's practicality to get the hair out of the face. But given that she has the slightly longer hair and it's very much Tess, absolutely I'm seeing this as intentional and shows that Tess had this really lasting impact on Ellie.
Everything this show does is intentional, people. We have to remember that. It's not just a hairstyle. Like, sometimes it is. Like, if you're going to fix it on and be like, her hair wasn't like that in the video game, get out of here, okay? Get out of here because that's ridiculous, all right? But that is incredible. That is incredible because Tess is the catalyst when you think about it. Like, maybe you go back and, like, Marlene is the catalyst, right? Like, right, sure, okay. Without Tess, Joel doesn't take Ellie anywhere. So she really is this like first connection Ellie makes outside of the QC, outside of the school, and Marlene's connection, which is much deeper than and longer, has more history than Tess. That's incredible, and gosh, Tess really does. I feel like Tess's impact is just felt in so many aspects of the show as they go on, right? Like, we'll talk later when Joel and Tommy reunite about he does all of this for Tess, and he doesn't, even next episode, right? Like, he doesn't tell or no, I'm trying to think now. Who is it that he doesn't tell that Tess died? Is it
Oh, it's Tommy. Yeah.
It's Tommy.
When they
okay.
go to the bar in Jackson, he's like, he refers to Tess and she's doing good.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's like he's suffering. And we talked earlier in the podcast about him saying pass when Ellie asks him questions.
inquires
He won't
about
even
the
talk about
relationship.
Tess
Yeah.
for like ever because it's too hard for him. It's too much. Yeah, it's incredible. Ugh.
Yeah. I to see that kind of development of the relationship, I've always felt like the TV show nailed it slightly better than the game in terms of establishing Tess as being that formative for Ellie. And I think not only is it just also like it's a first world relationship, but like you said, if it wasn't for Tess, Ellie wouldn't be alive. Like Tess is the one that really kind of makes the case and is the reason Joel does go on and sets things right. That whole thing of like telling Joel to set a load of things right. Oh God, if there's a lot of layers to that.
Hmm.
It's a shame that that message didn't come and stick with Joel, maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you could read that. I think you can read it in a few different ways where she does say save who you can save. And we're going to get to a point where he's choosing whether or not to save Ellie or possibly save humanity. And he
Hmm.
makes his decision.
Yep.
And I do think like Tess's death has a lot to do with that because yes, there's Tommy, but he also is going to have his own family and his own community by that point in the show. And all he has is Ellie and all she has is him.
Hmm.
And he's saving who he can save. He's not worried about the world. He's worried about Ellie. And it's just it all starts here. Like the
Yeah.
impact, it's not unlike the mycelial threats, Like
Hmm.
even though we're really far removed away from it, you can still feel that impact. It's still going to come running for you. So it's just so good. It's just so good, man. Like everything, it's the seeds. The seeds are here in this episode and in the first episode. But I feel like this episode really is the like I feel like you're shot out of a cannon with everything
Yeah.
else that's going to happen.
Hmm. Something that we didn't get to talk about in the non-spoilery section that I was going to bring up was Tess's possible backstory that they were going to reveal in the episode.
Yeah, expand on this because I don't know that I knew this.
Yeah, so what they were going to do was have perhaps a flashback scene, maybe replacing the whole Jakarta scene. I don't know,
Oh.
but they were going to have it be before the concept's outbreak, and of Tess being in Detroit, and that she was married and had a son. And following the outbreak, her husband and son were both infected, and she wasn't. She was forced to kill her husband, but couldn't kill her son. And so instead, she closed the door on that and ran away from the problem. And so theoretically, thoughts are her son is still out there, still infected, possibly still animated, clicker, whatnot. Yeah, horror, right?
That is so brutal, and it just it breathes more life into the question Ellie asks Joel of, "Do you ever feel bad killing one of them knowing they used to be like a
Exactly.
human?"
Yeah.
It just it totally brings new meaning, new life to that question.
It adds a lot of context for a lot of choices, I think, for how Tess is portrayed in this. Like when Ellie does the whole twitching and making a joke of it, and Tess does that kind of instant reaction of just stop it, because she doesn't want to imagine a kid as a clicker, does she? Like her son, like immediately, like Joel sees like the messing around and the kind of the mockery of the whole thing, and like almost like it's a betrayal of Sarah's memory to make jokes about it. Tess, on the other hand, sees her son in that situation and just
Yeah.
can't face it either. And it also like establishes that Joel and Tess are so linked in their
Yeah.
trauma. Oh,
And it just
it's
it
a
just
horrible.
shows it shows that anyone who is old enough to have lived through the outbreak has gone through some sort of trauma and that they're not all going to be the same. Yes, Joel lost his daughter. He didn't lose his daughter to the infection. Is that
Mhm.
better or worse? I don't know. Like both. But like
Yeah.
at the same point in time, he didn't have to watch his daughter turn. He didn't have to take the gun and turn it on his daughter, right? Like whereas I think going through something like that, if what you're saying, if that was what they were going to do with Tess, and this is just for the show, you're saying, right? Like this didn't stem originally from the video game. This is
Well,
something they added in.
this came about from conversation between Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. So Neil, obviously being the like the game's creator or like co-creator for part one. So like I imagine this was probably backstory that was percolating for the game then,
Yeah.
unless they've kind of
Yeah.
maybe brought this forward. I don't know. Maybe they've just had an idea of certainly Tess has her trauma that is similar to Joel's. So
Well,
maybe
that's
they.
I was just thinking that would be interesting if they had done that. It would have been interesting then to have the whole Henry and Sam thing play out, where
Mhm.
Henry is forced to take, take a gun against Sam. That's really interesting, and it makes, I mean, all the sense in the world that that is exactly what Tess's backstory would be, because let's face it, again, anyone who's lived through the outbreak is going to have some sort of a story like that. You'd have to imagine where they've either had to kill someone they love or watch someone they love be killed. It
Mhm.
has to be a pretty common thing for anyone who's lived this long to
Yeah.
lose someone they care about. And gosh, I can't imagine just, like, locking the door and walking away and being like, "Well, I hope eventually there's something that can be done about it," you
Yeah.
know? You have to
I mean,
imagine there'd be people out there who would be like, "What if I freeze them? Let's put them in, like, a cryogenic freezer until there's a cure and then come back." I don't know, I'm just saying.
part 3 maybe. We get to the mad science of it all.
You have to imagine. I think I messaged you this, right? I asked you this at some point, because I remembered it came up in The Walking Dead, and plenty of other zombie affiliated media. Of, has anybody tried chopping off a body part? Right? If you get infected in
Mhm.
your arm, hack the arm off. Does it stop the spread of infection? That's super common in
Yeah.
zombie media, and you have to imagine 20 years is a long time. People have experimented,
Oh, yeah.
especially people who are like, why the heck not? Let's try it. No harm in trying. Right. So, oh, fascinating. Oh my gosh.
There's gotta be some horrible, like, group that's out there, kind of like I mean, you've got your, like, the hunters and like the ones in the rattlers in part 2, like the slavers kind of ones. There's got to be some sick deranged fucker that would try that. That's,
Exactly. Let's
oh,
take someone, let them get bit, chop off their arm and see what happens. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
gosh, brutal stuff. As always, this is a wonderful show to really dive into the complexities of.
I mean, it's only
Um,
going to get worse next episode, Stuart. Like, we're about to get
yeah.
into the heartwarming and saddest episode. Like, it's both. It's both things all at the same
Well,
time.
this is the thing. I always I always have to remember that we don't get much of Henry and Sam in the next episode. We get very kind of little. It's mostly Joel and Ellie for the most part, and we get into the Kathleen of it all. Um, Henry and Sam, episode 4, which will be kind of coming up and stuff. And I think that's where the real knife twisting comes into it. But
Well,
I'm
I
really
was
excited to
referring
get
to
into.
the Bill and Fred of it all.
Oh my god, I completely forgot that episode. I'm
Season 1,
thinking the
episode
next one is
3.
Kansas. No, 3. Yeah, I've completely
No.
skipped over it. I've blocked that out for trauma.
Good
It's too
reasoning.
traumatic.
It's
Oh
too
my
hard.
gosh.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. How am I being that much of an idiot? Yeah,
Bill and Frank is
I don't think I've actually really kind of mentally prepared for covering
was
that
the
episode
best of
because
times and it was the worst of times. It's
yeah,
everything. I watched this episode not super long ago, and I think I messaged you. I think I watched it on Christmas Day. I'm a sick person. Remember I
yeah,
messaged you and I was like, "Yeah,
yeah,
we just
yeah,
watched a
yeah,
long, long time.
yeah. It was that's a choice.
I'll never eat a
I'm
strawberry again the same way."
It's yeah. I am to say yeah. I'm not looking forward. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also not looking forward to it. I'm hoping that we'll get into maybe a discussion about the kind of not just the episode, but also the reaction to the episode.
Mhm.
Correct some wrongs that are out there in terms of what this episode means and everything, and some of the choices involved in it all. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. But that will have to wait until next episode. Well, as much as we're doing spoilers, we're not getting into the next episode completely just
Mhm.
yet. Is there anything else you wanted to cover in this, Jess?
No, I love this episode. One other question, actually. I did have one
Oh yeah.
question I made note of. Before they go into the museum, I couldn't help but notice the way Tess holds her flashlight and gun, remarkably similar to how you would see a cop or a police
Oh
officer
yeah.
kind of do the crisscross arms, right? Now, again, this could be a learned behavior. She's had enough time smuggling outside of the QZ that she's had to be careful. I was curious if there was any sort of history with Tess being a cop. Just again, that one motion, that was it. And I don't know if there's anything there, but it was something I clocked. It was just
Trying to
interesting.
see if I can find anything. I don't think there is anything that's covered what she was doing
What her job was,
way
yeah.
back and before. Yeah.
And she doesn't
So
give like cop vibes or anything, but you never know.
I mean, if she would that change anything? Would you be down on Tess?
I would be a little sad about it. Yeah. But she was pretty anti-cop towards the end. So yeah, people change.
Yeah. Considering the way in which Tess referred to like Ellie, she goes, "Oh, you got some balls on you, sister." I get this whole like imagined like kind of vibe that she's like a real new wave feminist and was there like kind of really evoking the kind of vibes of the 60s. I don't think the age quite works in the timings too well
No,
with
but we
it.
can imagine.
But I imagine maybe she's grown up younger and has maybe looked at those aspirationally as those kind of women.
Yeah.
And talking about feminism, can we just talk about the fact that like Marlene, Tess, Maria, like strong female leaders have always been influencing Ellie throughout everything. Some solid
It's the
tactics here.
best.
Yeah.
It's the best. Yeah, it's great.
Okay. I think we've gushed enough then. So let's end things there. Remember, subscribe, look for Light Pod on all the podcatchers, on all the socials as well. Email in to lookforlightpodcast@gmail.com if you want to get in touch. But before we head away, should we channel some Will Livingston?
Yes.
Why don't clickers make good comedians? Their timing is so sporadic. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.